After the first affair, we thought it'd be a great idea to go to couples counseling. And it got recommended to us by one of our pastors, it got recommended by someone in the church, and we ended up going to a nouthetic counselor. Now, I'm not bashing nouthetic counselors, but at the same time, I'm kind of bashing nouthetic counselors, okay? And what I mean by this is when we went into this, the whole premise is basing everything off of the Bible and basing everything off of building a healthy marriage. Not a bad thing, right? Not a bad thing at all. I'm not saying that. The problem is the perspective of the person that is doing the counseling. Now, when you're in a toxic relationship and you walk into a counseling with a narcissist, you walk in being like, I don't know who's going to show up on the other side. Like the seat beside me, it's going to be the nice guy, it's going to be the mean guy, it's going to be the stonewalling guy. Like, I don't know who's going to show up. Well, inside a counseling scenario, a lot of times toxic people will show up in a way of being like, I want this marriage to work. I'm trying. She won't. And it gets like blame shifted, projected, all of those things go on. Now, inside of our counseling, the problem was when we were working with this guy initially is he started believing me, for one. That was a big problem because I was a liar. And then two, he started blaming Kayla for my choices. Bad idea, bad thought, bad theology, bad counseling, you name it. It was really bad. In the moment, we didn't realize it. We were super young. We weren't thinking about it. We were just like, okay, this is what we got told to do. Let's do this. This is what's going to fix us, all this kind of stuff. And so we go in and we start having these conversations and we meet like weekly for a good while and going back and forth, it slowly comes out this one concept, which is not a bad concept, but can be applied really, really poorly. And the concept was not making it easy for the other person to sin. Because again, we're talking about Christian nouthetic counseling. And the piece here is it makes sense of like, hey, you shouldn't be putting people in situations where they could fall, right? Where things could happen. You should be engaging in the relationship. You should be having like connection, love, all these things. You shouldn't be withholding certain things and then making the other partner go to someone else. Like, see, even there, I'm trying to explain it and it doesn't connect 100% because part of what's going on is blame. It's the blame and the shame game. And inside of this, we start to see in the counseling space with the nouthetic counselor that he was slowly implying that Kayla didn't make life good enough for me not to cheat. Do you see the implication? Like when it came down to it, it wasn't this simple, but it'd be this aspect of you didn't clean the house enough. You didn't mean the house welcoming. You didn't engage with me enough so that I wouldn't look at other women. What kind of bullshit is this? I didn't realize that at the time. I was like, oh yeah, see? It's not me, it's you. It's your fault that I cheated. How awful is that? But that's what we saw. That's what we experienced inside of Christian nouthetic counseling. Is this guy that continued to come back to the same piece of she didn't make it hard for me to sin. So it ended up being her fault that I made the decisions. It ended up being her fault that I made the choices. What an awful way to live and what an awful way to be. The reason why I'm so passionate about a lot of times not having couples that one is a narcissist or one is this toxic aspect that they're just lying constantly, not go to counseling and especially not go to Christian counseling is because what I've experienced is they're very unaware. They're not able to actually see this stuff for what it actually is. And as a result, they guilt and shame you to stay in a relationship that's extremely abusive. The church oftentimes has left people in relationships far too long simply because they don't want to have a blemish on their name. Guess what? There's a big blemish on the church's name and on religion's name simply because their divorce rates are just as bad as people outside the church. But that keeps it hidden more because we look better. Because like we have to appear a certain way. We have to show up and sing the songs and have a good time and then go home and then abuse the other person. So we started to see that this counselor just wasn't cutting it. Now, we didn't know at that point, honestly. Like, it wasn't a piece that we even knew. There's a piece of like, okay, let's just go through. We finally finished up with that counselor. We ended up moving, so just kind of ended up working, separating. But my wife carried a ton of guilt and shame from this. And for the longest time, she had to work on actually breaking free of the bondage that counselor put her in, making her feel and seem like it was all her fault. If she'd been a better wife, then I wouldn't have cheated. It had nothing to do with her. It had to do with my decisions. what I wanted. The selfishness piece inside of me saying, this is what I want, so I'm going to go do what I want. Yeah, I would use it as a victim, being like, oh, well, you're not loving me. Oh, you're not, like, whatever. But all of this was put together so that I could do what I wanted to do. Those decisions were mine. And it took a long time for my wife to realize that. She finally had one other counselor mentioned her and had to do it very, very bluntly, saying, hey, you didn't put a gun to Ben's head and force him to go cheat. Like, you didn't make him do this. But how many times have you heard the toxic guy in your life that said, oh, you made me do this? I wouldn't be raging if you'd listened to me. I wouldn't be doing this if you would have respected me. I wouldn't have cheated on you if you would have given me more sex. I wouldn't have. And it's always blaming the other person. It's blaming the other person because he doesn't want to take accountability for his own choices. And he's not willing to see that the results that are in his life are a direct correlation to the choices that he made. Now you bring this into the couples section and the couples counseling, and it gets really dicey because you got the couples counselor, therapist sitting on the other side that looks at them and says, okay, like, I believe that they want to come together to heal this. Or like, hey, they're here for a reason. They're here in a couple session because they want to work through this. Majority of people don't go to couple sessions to get divorced, right? Like, it's a piece of, hey, we want to work on this. And so they walk in with the premise of, we want to work on this. And sometimes the wife is so abused at that point, she's like, I don't really want to work on this, but I'm kind of guilt tripped into going in because then I'm a bad person. Guess what? When you leave a toxic relationship, you're always going to be the bad person. Own it and move on. It sounds weird. It sounds callous when I say that. I'm not trying to say that, but I just want you to understand you can do everything under the sun to make it the smoothest breakup ever, to make it the smoothest divorce ever, and he'll still blame you. Or you can just leave, and then he'll blame you. Either way, he's going to blame you. There's not an option that you get off scot-free and you don't feel like you're not getting blamed. He's going to continue to blame other people because he's not going to be accountable and responsible for himself. So instead, he'd rather be like, well, let me go interact with someone else. Let me go focus on something else. Let me project onto something else, whatever it might be. So why not go to couples counseling with a toxic person? Well, because typically he's going to manipulate the therapist. Getting the therapist, getting the counselor on his side, trying to pit you against the other person, triangulate, lying, gaslighting, all these different things will happen inside the actual training, the actual counseling. And when this goes on, sometimes it creates a reaction or response from you that doesn't look normal or that doesn't look right. And the whole reason of having this inside the counseling space is so that you look crazy. So imagine that he says something and he's gaslighting you and you get frustrated, you get pissed off and you're like, I can't believe you'd say that, whatever it might be. He's using different circumstances to poke and prod at you so that you react in a certain way so that you look like the crazy person. And when you look like the crazy person inside of counseling, he wins. He starts to lord it over you and then starts to be like, yeah, see, this is what I've been dealing with. And a lot of times we'll see counselors and therapists that are just not equipped to deal with narcissists. Heck, there's a lot of therapists that won't even work with narcissists because there's either no money in it because they realize, hey, I can't fix this person, or they realize, hey, it's a lost cause. Why would I want to do this? So inside of couples, a lot of them don't even have a clue. There's many people that have come to Raw Motivations to ask questions and to work through things, and they're therapists, they're counselors that have gotten stuck in their own toxic relationships while they try to counsel other people out of toxic relationships. We've seen coaches in this space that have been leading the forefront of trying to help people get free from toxic relationships, and their life has been greatly impacted because they've fallen into another toxic relationship while they're trying to help liberate other people from toxic relationships. This stuff happens over and over and over again. So I need you to really consider, if you're thinking about going to couples counseling with a narcissist, with a toxic guy in your life, what's his ability to be honest now? Is he willing to be honest? Is he willing to be called out? Is he willing to be accountable? Because if you don't see this one-on-one with him and you don't see this inside the counseling, you need to get out. Because there's not a piece that's going to help you be free if he's unwilling to acknowledge reality. If he's unwilling to see the facts of the situation, all this is going to do is continue to take you down a dark road of supposable hope, guilt, and shame because you don't leave and because he keeps telling you, well, you have to stay to work on this, when in reality, you're always going to be the bad guy. Now, I realize inside of this video, we've kind of been all over the place. It hasn't been intentional. It's just kind of happened that way. But inside of this, I want you to think, don't go to counseling with a toxic guy, period. Now you might want to give him a chance, right? You're like the heartstrings are pulling. You're like, but he really wants it. Okay, give it a chance, and then see of his level of accountability and honesty inside the sessions. See the counselor's ability to call him out, because if they're not willing to do that, you've got a bad counselor. Like, you need to have someone who's willing to hold people accountable. If not, nothing's going to shift, change, develop, or transform in the life and in the relationship that you're currently trying to build. You might have to go a couple times before he gets pissed off at the therapist and says, I'm done. You might have to go a couple times before you start to see different things. But don't stay in this long term if you don't see shifts happening, if you don't see transformation happening. If you don't see it, you need to start focusing on you. That's the only person that can actually change right here, right now, is you, of how you grow and how you develop. And as you grow and develop, he has the option of either rising up with you or the gap just keeps getting bigger. And you start realizing faster and faster that this relationship is or isn't what you actually want.